Welcome everybody to this side event organized by the European Commission at this super important COP. The whole world is looking to what is happening in Glasgow. And this side event here is catching up a little bit with the issue that is quite new to these global conferences. It's hydrogen. So hydrogen has, stepped out of the corner of, I would say, a science fiction idea of the energy transition to one of the central pillars. And not only in Europe, where I am from, I'm Yorgos Chatzimarkakis. I'm the CEO of Hydrogen Europe, which is an association that covers the whole value chain from hydrogen production over the use, the transportation and the use of hydrogen in different sectors. And I have the honor to welcome you to this event of the European Commission. And we are also pleased and honored to welcome distinguished guests. And in the speaking order, I would like to present to you somebody who knows the global level very well. That's Daria Nochevnik, who will be speaker on behalf of the Hydrogen Council. The Hydrogen Council is our partner association on the global level. And we are pleased to see Daria here, who will present a little bit the global view. Then we will have as a guest here, Wouter van Hout from Initio. I will present all of them when it's their turn to speak. And then we have David Herrero from Fertiberia, who will give us practical examples why we need something which we call guarantees of origin. The renewable world knows it quite well, how important it is. Basically, also the gaseous world knows it quite well. And now it's time to discuss how this relates, because hydrogen is a gas, hydrogen is a molecule, but it can be based on purely renewable production. And this is what we are going to discuss today. What can we learn? Which lessons we can draw from the previous experiences that the renewable energy markets had, especially in Europe, where the consumer wants to know, is the electron, is the current that comes into my room or that I use as an industry, is it really renewable? Does it have a renewable origin? It doesn't smell, it doesn't have a color, and it's very, very similar to hydrogen. Hydrogen needs to have a certification scheme. And why is this so? We will now hear and learn from Daria. Daria, as I said, represents the Hydrogen Council. She is the Policy and Partnerships Director there. Daria is an expert in climate and energy policy and regulation. Over the past decade, she has worked with energy companies, industry associations, policymakers and consultancies, helping them navigate the policy and regulatory landscape in Europe, as well as building and successfully implementing their advocacy strategies. Daria's main focus areas have been the development of the enabling policy and legislative framework for hydrogen, carbon pricing, and the design of the European wholesale energy market. So perfect preconditions to explain to us the global setting. Why on earth do we need another certification scheme for this earth? Daria, I would like you to take the floor first before we then continue with the other presentations. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Yorgo. Thank you for this introduction. I'm indeed delighted to be joining this session today on behalf of the Hydrogen Council. To those of you who may not know it, the Hydrogen Council is a global coalition of CEOs formed in Davos in 2017. And today we are proud to be representing companies operating all over the world, not only in Europe, but Asia, Africa, North America, South America, and Australia. And our member companies, of course, have deep expertise across the hydrogen value chain. And they are united by a common vision and a common ambition that is for hydrogen to foster their transition to net zero globally. And the topic of today's discussion, we definitely see it as a key priority for the industry and for governments. So robust certification systems for hydrogen are absolutely crucial for the development of the hydrogen economy. we believe that there is a strong need for enhanced GOs, meaning the guarantees of origin for hydrogen that would evidence not only the origin, but also the carbon footprint and other sustainability attributes of all hydrogen production pathways. And these enhanced GOs will play a key role, and this role is essentially threefold. So firstly, these enhanced GOs will be key to build consumer trust, and consumer trust is absolutely crucial to stimulate demand and effectively enable a market-based approach to hydrogen sourcing. And ultimately, we need those enhanced GOs to foster global cross-border trade in hydrogen, which will allow matching supply and demand for hydrogen in an efficient manner across geographies. Now, I think that in the description of this event, we were alluding to a global certification system. And of course, in the ideal world, it would be great to have that. But I think in reality, we will most likely end up with regional certification schemes. And we already see them emerging in different jurisdictions. What does this mean in practice? This means that it is crucial to develop international standards that would underpin these systems. And in particular, I would like to highlight the need for a standard methodology for measuring the carbon footprint and other sustainability attributes of hydrogen. Such a standard methodology will play a key role in informing the thresholds for qualifying hydrogen as low carbon or renewable, but also align taxonomies that would be used to qualify hydrogen manufacturing as a sustainable economic activity. Now, on that, I would also mention the work that has been done by International Partnership for Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy. Our colleagues from IPHE have started working on developing, and they have created a methodology for calculating greenhouse gas content of hydrogen production pathways. And this initiative is absolutely crucial as it allows for building international consensus on this matter. Now, in our view, this work should indeed feed into the development of a dedicated standard at international level, meaning an ISO standard. And we can build on the existing ISO family of standards, so ISO 1460 and 1440. Now, I will conclude this brief intervention by saying that we explore all these matters in our latest report called A Policy Toolbox for Low Carbon and Renewable Hydrogen. This report was released just this Wednesday, and it was presented at COP26 in Glasgow in tandem with our report called Hydrogen for Net Zero, which explores the carbon abatement potential of hydrogen by 2030 and by mid-century. And of course, the development of robust certification systems and international industry standards is featured as part of this toolbox. I encourage all of you to have a look at the report. And I'll stop here, and I look forward to our discussion.
Many, many thanks, Daria. I think you really managed in few minutes to come across with the broad picture, but also the needs that we have in order to build up this robust system of guarantees of origin, of certification scheme. You also mentioned the work of the IPHE, so the International Partnership for Hydrogen in the Energy, which is just for our for people watching us here to understand, it has been created in the early 2000s already, when there was the first, let me call it boom. It was not a hype then, but it was a boom of the willingness to understand better the role of hydrogen. We all remember Jeremy Rifkin and his idea of the hydrogen economy. And so over the years, the cooperation on a global scale of governments has definitely led to some basic standards that we have and that we can build upon. That's very, very good. On the other hand, you mentioned regional front runner roles. And one of these regions is indeed Europe. And Europe, we have endeavored to start with the idea of a hydrogen certification quite early. So the last decade, we have made major steps into that direction, maybe a little bit more connected to clean hydrogen, so decarbonized hydrogen-based on methane, on natural gas. But we can draw a lot of lessons from that procedure, which is called certify, so with an HY in the end. And we can draw also lessons from the other renewable markets that exist, because in the end, if we wish to use what we know for renewable hydrogen, we need to build this knowledge on both experiences. The master of the universe of Certify is Wouter van Hout. So he's the gentleman on this globe who knows best how to use Certify, but how also to make it happen on a global scale. Wouter is working for Initio. He's the director for Europe. Initio is a strategic consultancy specialized in hydrogen, and Wouter has been the project leader of Certify, of this initiative, since 2014, so nearly 10 years now working on it, which is the leading green and blue hydrogen certification system worldwide. Wouter is CEN TC6 liaison. He's shaping the CEN standard for hydrogen guarantees of origin, and is also in the association of issuing body, or he is also an association of issuing body in the gas scheme group, and there he is the chair. Wouter, I think that were clear words that give you now a lot of responsibility to explain Certify and its role for a global certification scheme. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jorgo, for your nice words and putting a lot of burden on my shoulders on a Friday noon. But indeed, it's the case that we started working since 2011 on the topic of hydrogen certification. Back in those days, we already have seen quite a lot of European member states that were having biogas certification standards in all the countries set up. And we thought it was very interesting because it was giving a lot of support towards the biogas industry. But on the other hand, all those local initiatives were not interconnected. And we already saw back in 2012 that doing cross-border trade was difficult. So that's why we've actually been doing a good analysis on renewable electricity geos, which are existing in Europe way longer, and try to have some good lessons learned from that particular industry and how they've been able to create a harmonized and fairly liquid market in Europe. And when we look back at that, we know that in the case of electricity, historically, we had vertically integrated industries, meaning we had national monopolies doing the production, the transport, and the sales of electricity. And already in the early days, they were based on the contractual arrangements. They were allocating certain renewable electricity on specific customers. When in 1999, the European Commission decided to unbundle the electricity system, meaning to split up between electricity producers, electricity transport companies, and electricity suppliers. It became much harder to do this electricity tracking through PPAs. And therefore, the guarantee of origin instrument was developed in the electricity world. And we currently have two different markets. We have the electricity commodity market on the one hand, and we have the guarantee of origin market, which is trading the environmental attributes. And this is not a commodity market, it's actually a specialized product, because consumers are picking the kind of product that they would like to have. It can be wind, it can be solar, it can be national, and so forth and so onwards. And these are very two liquid markets, both the electricity exchange as well as the geo markets, and they can be traded individually from themselves. So that has been really our inspiration for hydrogen geos. A couple of the things we had to do in the meantime is we had to deal with energy convergence. Contrary to lots of renewable electricity is produced by a windmill, by a solar cell. and therefore electricity is a primary electricity source in many occasions. Hydrogen is an energy vector. It doesn't exist naturally or only in very few occasions, and it has to be made from renewable electricity. So how you will deal with those conversions from one energy vector into another one, that's been a big part of the learning process. Also, renewable electricity geos in Europe, they don't carry any carbon footprint. We already in 2014 decided to make a carbon footprinting to be an essential part of the hydrogen geo. We've been doing lots of case studies on carbon footprinting. We've seen that the international standard for carbon footprinting, it is robust, except for one thing, and that's how to deal with complex multi-input and output plans, and how you can allocate carbon intensity from the inputs towards the outputs. And I think we've been doing there a lot of work in that occasion. I must also say that electricity so far, it's it's a European-centered market. And we have the European grid is considered to be a copper plate. And of course, we never had to deal with imports. We never had battery ships coming from Chile towards Europe, providing renewable electricity into our system. Also, the hydrogen geo system has not been set up to deal with international transports yet. This is something we're looking actively into. And many people are asking how we can account for the carbon footprint of the transport from one region to another. Of course, in case such geos needs to be harmonized and needs to be able to give customer trust, it means that everybody globally that is going to issue such geos must be under the same quality assurance standards. In Europe, it was already difficult to set this up, but considering we all have the same law, if we want to do that internationally, of course, that is going to raise extra questions. And then the European scheme that we set up, indeed, we need to fine tune it to other jurisdictions. So we have been heavily contributing towards the International Hydrogen Partnership for Fuel Cells and Hydrogen in the Economy, that's IPHE. We are in contact with many states around the globe, both people willing to produce or to import hydrogen. We're helping them to set up their hydrogen certification systems, but it also allows us to learn from their national laws, etc., to see to what extent we need to update the European standard we made so far to make it a global standard. And there we need to be very humble, we need to be very open, and we need to working together to make something that is acceptable and feasible worldwide. And I think that are the important challenges coming up for our initiative.
Many thanks, Walter. We will, in a second round, come to a better understanding how this looks like, how this works in practice, over the counter and in the back office. So I think this is very interesting for the audience of this event also to really imagine how this works in practice. But in order to understand why it's important in practice, we now should move to a very, very concrete example of where this makes already sense as of today. David Herrero is representing Fertiberia, and Fertiberia is one of the biggest producers of fertilizers in the world. And David is the COO of Fertiberia, serving also on its board of directors. He joined Fertiberia, I think, in 2001, coming from Accenture, so has a long experience now with this fertilizer industry. David is board member of Fertilizers Europe. This is a partner association, to say it right away, of Hydrogen Europe, and he's the chairman of its technical committee. He co-chairs the Industrial Roundtable at the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance. That's a big get-together, I would say, with nearly 2,000 members now of the European hydrogen sector, the broader hydrogen sector. He holds a degree in civil engineering from Imperial College of London and the Universidad Politécnica of Madrid. And he will be very, very concrete, as he works not with hydrogen only, but with a derivative. And this is important to understand. It's not only about hydrogen, but also about other commodities that are already existing, but they could stem from hydrogen. David, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jorgo, for this kind introduction. And I'm delighted to be in this event on behalf of Fertiberia and Fertilizers Europe. Fertiberia is an European leader in sustainable crop nutrition, and our industrial footprint is mainly focused in both Spain and Portugal. We are also the first European fertilizer company to produce renewable ammonia at scale and based on solar energy, and very soon, starting in February 2022, here in Spain. And this is the main reason why the subject of certification and GOs is of great interest to us. Today, the fertilizer industry accounts about 40% of the hydrogen which is produced, but we don't sell this hydrogen. We are using this hydrogen as a raw material for our ammonia production. Ammonia is the building block for nitrogen fertilizer production and other technical products. In the future, also, we believe that ammonia will play a key role in the deployment of this new hydrogen economy for its unique set of properties. Ammonia is a carbon-free molecule. It has a higher density than hydrogen, and it can be stored and transported much easier and more efficient way. And these properties allow and enable ammonia, for instance, to be used as a direct fuel in the maritime sector, helping them to fully decarbonize the sector. Or we believe that ammonia will be also used by the energy sector because it will be considered as one of the preferred options in storing and transporting renewable or low carbon hydrogen, indeed. And but here is where the challenge comes. I mean, I don't sell hydrogen. My industry today is in the food value chain. And today, making a green fertilizer is more expensive than the alternative. If we go down into the value chain downstream, this is true also. So basically, if we want to have a solid business case here, we need some market traction and probably some market premium. But in the case of food, the decision of paying a premium can only be taken by the really end consumer. I mean, by you, Jorgo, by the attendants to this event, by me, by your friends, when we are going to the supermarket or when we click on Amazon. My point here is that certifying hydrogen is good and is the starting base, but it's not enough to create this market attraction. For the final consumer to take an informed decision on what he or she is eating, we need to put in place a sound, robust, global, transparent, traceable, and credible certification scheme that not only covers hydrogen, but also includes ammonia and that ends up at food level. In other words, we need here a certification scheme that goes from the generation of renewable hydrogen to the fork. And this will be the same case, not only for the food value chain, but also for the maritime or for the use of ammonia in the energy sector. In my role as a co-chair of this CEO Roundtable of the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, I have very much insisted in the need of having in place this certification scheme at the soonest. Ammonia certification must build on existing hydrogen certification, but also include the specifics of the ammonia production. And here in the European fertilizer industry, we are already starting to develop this kind of certification scheme. We aim to have a pilot by next year that will actually certify production of low carbon ammonia. And for being successful in this certification, we need for sure the support of the public authorities. We need to cooperate with other international organizations as we are in a global market. And it's critical to have an early alignment to ensure coherence. This in return will give the credibility to this scheme to be extended globally. We also need to have an agreement on the credibility of the certification agencies. In other words, only globally trusted and credible organizations should be allowed to certify hydrogen or ammonia. Credibility is the pillar of any certification scheme. No credibility, no market traction, no market premium, more difficult the business case for green products. And I thank you.
Many thanks. Muchas gracias, David. I pick it up from there because I would first of all also like to say that Hydrogen Europe is promoting the 5T approach when it comes to this certification scheme. So you need transparency for the tracing and tracking, but also for the trading. So you have 4 T's. The 5th T is trust. We only these 4 T's that would create trust into the whole system, and that's what we are talking about here. We want to make clear that in all ways hydrogen can be used, and the ammonia case is quite interesting because it's very, very similar to the hydrogen case. It can be a storage capacity, so you can store energy. It can be a fuel. You mentioned it, David. You can fuel big ships with it. So tankers that go on a 2-stroke engine over long distances, they could run on ammonia. And third, it can be a chemical feedstock that you use in the fertilizer industry, which is, by the way, globally the biggest consumer of hydrogen at the moment. In Europe, it's the petrochemical industry, so fertilizers are second. However, it's very, very important to move ahead with this existing market, and that's why I'm super interested in understanding better this premium effect. So this premium that you have put forward. First of all, when will this all start, David? Is it very soon that you start the real production? You mentioned that it happens already. Is it only European, or is there also foreseen a non-European component? One of your competitors or partners, Yara, does that already in Morocco, which is not far away from Spain, but it's outside the European Union. So how do you see this to be realized with a premium, and when does it start to be needed?
I mean, what I can tell you is about when we are starting production of green fertilizers and renewable fertilizers. And this is happening on February next year. Today, we are finalizing all the tie-ins, all the construction of the plant, and we are planning to have the first drop of green ammonia that I think it will be a first one in Europe for sure by that month. So from there, we will start building this market approach. For sure, we are not sure about how we are going to approach the market, and even I cannot disclose that. But this needs to happen, especially for the first movers. We know today that producing green fertilizer is more expensive than the alternative, and especially at the beginning. So we plan to start immediately once production is resumed. We will start, and we are already working on that market approach. I mean, we have initiated our projects in where are our existing operations, and these are basically in Portugal, in Spain. This plant I'm talking about is located in the center of Spain, close to an area with a lot of renewable potential coming from sun and wind. And this is also the reason why we have decided to put this plant in our existing operation. But for sure, I mean, we are in a global market, and we are foreseeing different alternatives. Several days ago, we announced a new greenfield project in Sweden, and we are willing to develop these kind of operations where basically renewable potential is present, and this is our approach.
Let me become concrete, because I want everybody to really understand what we are talking about. So, first of all, it starts very soon in February next year. So as of then, you will have the much more valuable, let me put it like that, and higher priced hydrogen that you then use in your production, which makes the product much more expensive, of course. Now, the premium, we could translate this premium idea into a contract for difference. So this is a tool that is discussed at the moment in many geographies, but mainly in Europe, where you can levelize basically the delta. So the extra cost that you, Fertiberia, would have, you could levelize this by a state aid tool, which is the contract for difference. So the difference of the fossil-based price to the hydrogen, which is renewably produced price, would be covered. However, and this is now my understanding, the state, in this case, possibly Spain, that gives you the money because you produce in Spain and they have an interest to keep you in Spain, they need to have an evidence that you really used renewably produced hydrogen for your ammonia production. I think this is the mechanism that we are talking here about. And if I would be then the minister of the Spanish government who needs to give you, well, in the end, it will be quite some money. So if we see the volumes, it will go in millions. I would say, David, before I give you the money, I want to have absolutely transparent clearance that you really produced this on a renewable basis. I now move. I think you are nodding. So this is exactly the mechanism that we are describing here. I now would ask Wouter, how can we make sure that David is given the right tool to go to his minister and say, here, I want this contract for difference. I want the money right now. Otherwise, us as the consumers of, well, fertilizers are used everywhere in agriculture and not only, but we would need to pay the extra price. So how can we make sure, Wouter, that David is given a tool into his hand that he can show to the minister in Spain? Can you describe this process?
Absolutely. But by doing so, I would like to refer once more towards renewable electricity geos, because this is a long and an historic market in Europe. And what we've seen is that member states have been putting in place certification systems for renewable electricity so that they were able to give feed-in tariffs. Back in the days, people were giving feed-in tariffs to support production. Contract for difference is a much more recent tool. And it was very important that there was a support by government given to produce those renewable electrons. Now, the certification system that was developed for governments to have trust that this renewable electricity was really produced was actually ended around the geo system. So we had one certification system which was acting for dual purpose. It's one, to give confidence to policymakers giving CAPEX or OPEX support for the production of a renewable electron in this case. And on the other hand, a geo existed by which that was allowing to very slowly but steadily create a premium market based on marketing. And what we've seen in the field of renewable electricity is that certain households have been buying renewable electricity contracts already from 2014. They've been buying European renewable electricity. So it was a rather simplistic premium product. But on the other hand, we also saw already big actors, let's say like Google, IKEA, AkzoNobel, and so forth and so onwards. They were not buying renewable electricity. They wanted to have Dutch offshore unsupported wind. So you can immediately feel that certain customers are early movers, having the professional expertise to pick a specific product out there. And this market has been creating slowly but steadily. Today, geos have a fair price, I would say, and it's really already yielding, it's an important revenue stream of renewable electricity producers. Comparing that to hydrogen, comparing that to renewable ammonia, I think we go into the same story. And so ammonia needs to be made based on that. Renewable fertilizers can be made. The market is in price discovery. Who will be paying this premium price? Are it the farmers We know that farmers are working on very thin margins, likely not so. Is this on the contrary, are these the big institutions like Unilever, Procter and Gamble, etc., that would like to promote renewable products, or are it the supermarkets that are willing to promote renewable-based fertilizers turned into green tomatoes and so forth and so onwards? The market is into a discovery mode, and this market needs to be created slowly but steadily. So indeed, in the meantime, it's important governmental support can be given, for instance, through contract for differences. And I perfectly think that a GO system, just like what happened for renewable electricity, will be providing enough evidence and security and trust towards governments to give contract for differences to those industries willing to be early movers, invest early onwards, but to at least have a part of this extra cost being covered. As Inicio, we are also working together with Fertilizers Europe. So there also we recognize the importance of not only looking at the hydrogen aspect, but also understand what are the specificities of the ammonia industry to work very closely and hand in hand with them in making a renewable ammonia certification scheme based on the work that has been done within Certify.
Many thanks. I think that clarifies a lot, and I'll come back to you about to understand better this over-the-counter market and to make it also transparent. But how is the rest of the world, Daria? How is the rest of the world understanding this quite European concept so far? I mean, we Europeans, we have our experiences. Wouter might also not when he hears that there have been also lessons of cases where we saw that guarantees of origin have been abused. So there has been done some deals that have not been transparent. But how is the rest of the world catching up on that? Do we risk? I'm very blunt here. Do we risk to come across with a new colonial European idea that will not be accepted, because that cannot be in our interest? It's the opposite is the case. And how can we take the rest of the world on board this discussion? Daria, please.
Thank you very much, Jorgo. And I can only agree that the standards and the common rules that would need to be developed for geosystems for hydrogen would have to be inclusive, and we have to factor in the perspectives from across different geographies. And I think what we do come back to in our discussion are two things. It's consumer trust. This is something that we have been, I think, talking about for the past half hour, and the importance that geo schemes for hydrogen, of these schemes in indeed allowing consumers to signal that demand for hydrogen, and as a consequence, creating market-based sourcing of hydrogen across geographies. And we have also touched upon the CFD schemes, and I think that indeed, if we look at the CFD schemes for hydrogen that are envisaged by the prospective importers, well, these CFD schemes are actually due to go live fairly soon. And we know that there are still questions around how exactly would we qualify that imported hydrogen as renewable or low carbon, depending on the political, the preferences of governments and jurisdictions over the hydrogen they would like to import. And so in that sense, again, the development of certification systems that would allow for those certificates to be fungible cross-border is absolutely key. And I think just this August, we have seen the Australian government consulting international stakeholders on the development of their Australian geo schemes for hydrogen. In Europe, of course, we have Certify as the pioneering initiative. There is also the High Exchange project in the Netherlands, which is looking at developing a pilot system for certificates for hydrogen. So I think that there are initiatives and projects of varying degree of maturity that are out there and are considered across different jurisdictions, and making sure that certificates are fungible, making sure that we have those common rules and standards that would underpin those certificates worldwide is absolutely key. And the time is really now, because again, like we discussed, some specific support schemes and international projects on hydrogen are already out there, and they are due to be going live very soon. So I think that we cannot underestimate the urgency of the work that needs to be done on hydrogen certification. And for that, we do need to have both the industry and governments and national authorities sitting at the same table and figuring out those underlying rules. I think this is absolutely key.
Thank you very much. And it's good to hear that also other geographies, you mentioned Australia, are definitely pushing into that direction. So we are not alone anymore. And we also know from our talks with the US, the new Biden administration, that there is a huge interest to look into this. David, I would like to understand better how the rest of, so to say, the broader hydrogen community that you know very well from the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance is basically reacting to these proposals that you made in your roundtable, because you are pushing, because you are under time pressure. And it's wonderful to see that we are not talking theory, we are talking real things, because you start in February and you want to have something, you will be a front runner and you want to have something in your hand. How is the other part of the hydrogen family, the broader hydrogen family, reacting to that? And there's one question that I would like to understand a little bit better, because all of you talked about the carbon footprint and the question, the way how to measure this. And this is controversial still. However, it makes sense to develop something in Europe. But Daria just mentioned also the international aspect. So just let's assume that your production of green hydrogen, renewably produced hydrogen in Spain, is not enough. Would you consider to import hydrogen from outside Europe? And are there any ideas to use this mechanism already for this international dimension? So many questions. What's the reaction of your peers at your roundtable, and how do you see this international carbon footprint measurement?
Okay, Joe, I will try to do my best. No, regarding the first question, we were very aligned in the roundtable about what are the pain points and the barriers in order to develop these kind of projects. Unfortunately, not everyone is in the same pace as we are in Fertiberia, but we all saw the need and the urgency, as Daria was saying, to start developing all this certification scheme to go downstream the industry. I mean, we are in the fertilizer industry, but it's the same case for the steel industry. It's the same case for cement. I mean, we need all to develop this this certification of hydrogen into downstream application. I mean, you were talking before about receiving state aid funding to cope with the different cost difference. I think that this is for sure a very important theme for the front runners and for the first projects. But in the long run, we need to find a sustainable business case, and we need to act on the cost, and the cost will go down with projects and scale. And then we will need to develop this market. And for that reason, certification is fundamental, as I was saying before, and all my colleagues in the roundtable were fully aligned with that statement. Then your second question was regarding if we were considering to import ammonia from other or hydrogen from other places. I mean, today we are already importing also ammonia. We are producing part of our ammonia, but we are also importing some ammonia. Today is great, but in the future, if there are other geographies with low carbon ammonia, I mean, that could be a possibility. Why not? And again, for that reason, it's very important to have in place a system that allows you to have this certification and to have this carbon footprint. Because, I mean, when we are mixing different raw materials, different feedstock, it's fundamental to have an international standard. We in Fertilizers Europe, we have developed our own carbon footprint calculator for the main fertilizers. We are working on it to make it more powerful. We know that it's being used internationally, not only by the members of our association, and we are willing to develop that as a standard or as a global standard. This is the way as we see, Jorgo.
That's very, very practical. And I would like to ask both of you, Daria and Wouter, how this international discussion about the right methodology can be assessed right at the moment. I don't know, maybe I start with Wouter to explain a little bit the European view on this measuring carbon footprint. You mentioned already this interesting case when imports come in, whether or not to account also the shipping, so to say, the carbon footprint that happens during the transport of the hydrogen. I think it goes without saying, but that makes it more complicated. Where are we at the moment on a European level? And I would ask the same to Daria, where she sees this at the moment being discussed on an international level. Wouter, you want to start?
Yes. Very good and very relevant questions. I think the Certify initiative has been backed up financially by the Fuel Cell Hydrogen Joint Undertaking for in total now 2 million. 2 million euros. I think 50% of that was definitely spent on the carbon footprinting methodologies. So it somewhere gives a little bit of the current pain points away. After having done quite a lot of case studies, we do see that the international life cycle analysis framework, it is robust. ISO standards are out there. So that's not really the problem. There's a big issue on allocation. That is a very difficult one. I give you a very simple example. You can have a chloralkali electrolyzer that is using electricity. And that electricity is carrying a certain carbon footprint. The chloralkali electrolyzer is having 3 outputs, chlorine, caustic soda, as well as hydrogen. How are we going to spread out the carbon footprint of the electricity over those 3 products? When you would say it's a mass-based allocation system, it would mean hydrogen is very light, chlorine, caustic soda is very heavy. It would mean that you can burden the chlorine and the caustic soda very heavily. Under such a system, you can even use coal-based electricity and still your hydrogen would be low carbon, not renewable, but low carbon. Is that what we want? You can do value-based allocation, mole-based allocation, energy-based allocation, substitution-based allocation, and so forth and so onwards. And all of those allocations will yield very different results. I think it's important that either politically or at an ISO level that there is a certain prioritization of which allocation is used in which particular situation. We are developing those case studies. I believe that many of those case studies will still need to be developed before we can derive international standards on those allocation issues. Let me further say that I think we understand the challenge in detail up to the point of production. Within Europe, we didn't go further than that, so we didn't go into carbon intensity calculations of the transport. We have it on the roadmap. I don't really expect any problems over there.
Many thanks. Now let's move to Daria and to the international discussion and the international idea of the methodology for measuring carbon footprint. Which trends do you see and how fast can we get to a globally accepted result? COP is global, so will that be an issue of one of the next COPs?
Yeah, thanks a lot for this, Jorgo, and I absolutely concur with Wouter on the fact that, of course, greenhouse gas allocation for hydrogen as a core product is a really critical question to get a grips with and to clarify. And we do have, of course, when we talk about the development of that methodology for calculating the carbon footprint and other sustainability attributes of hydrogen, which of course may include the use of land, water, rare earth metals, we do have, especially when talking about the measurement of greenhouse gas emissions associated with hydrogen production pathways, there is a robust indeed family of standards that are there is already out there and is developed by ISO. I've mentioned the standards 1460 family of standards and 1440, and we do believe that it's crucial to make sure that we start developing that dedicated standard for hydrogen at ISO level. And once this work is kicked off, and we hope that this is something that will be done already beginning of next year, it will take at least 3 years to get to a place where we will have that international standard in place. This is the timeline we're looking at. And in the meantime, I would again reiterate that there are some really important initiatives that have been developed. And for example, IPHE, our partners, International Partnership for Fuel Cells and Hydrogen in the Economy, have worked on a methodology for calculating the carbon footprint of hydrogen production pathways. And we think that it is indeed an important step towards building that international consensus, and that can feed into the development of that international standard at ISO level. And this standard can then inform legislative frameworks for hydrogen. Because again, if you look into, for example, we have the taxonomy for sustainable finance, we have thresholds there for qualifying hydrogen manufacturing as a sustainable economic activity. It also refers to ISO standards as a way for and a reference point, calculating, measuring that carbon footprint of hydrogen. So there is a way to go, but I think that there has been some good work that has been done already by international parties. There is a lot we can build on, and that work at international level by ISO, I think, will be absolutely crucial.
Many thanks. That was very helpful to understand, also to reiterate these ISO standards that exist already. I would now like to talk about this timeline. You mentioned, Daria, start next year, and then we have 3 years. Do we really need 3 years? I give you a very concrete example, and Wouter, if you have a look at the chat, there's a very concrete question that I would now link to this because it's about the decarbonization or the carbon footprint in relation to grey hydrogen, so to steam, methane, reform hydrogen without CCS. We have seen the announcement of Saudi Arabia some 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, where they said they would dedicate their biggest gas field that they have. It's the value of $110 billion. They would dedicate this to the production of hydrogen only. The problem is, I mean, that's great news. There is no clear mentioning of the technology yet. They call it blue. However, that brings us into this understanding: which decarbonization effect are they going to apply? And now comes the problem. This all should start in 2024. So that's very, very close. It's good news for the hydrogen sector, because all the question, where do the big volumes that we need for the decarbonization come from, will be more and more clarified step by step. This is just one announcement. There will be others that follow. Yet we are under pressure, Wouter, to come to an answer, because the certify threshold that you developed over the last 8 years is different from the threshold that so far has been mentioned by the European Commission. By the way, it also differs from the political threshold that Hydrogen Europe is asking for. We are asking for 90%. It's even more advanced and more challenging. So how do you see this in the timeline of the next years? Can we manage to have something like that, possibly in the hydrogen package that will be presented by the European Commission 14th of December? I think the proposal will be on our desks. And I would come back also to David, because David has made a very concrete proposal with Fertiberia on the calculation, how he sees, so to say, the future of this very, very distinct proposal. But first, Wouter, can you clarify where the threshold will be and why there is such a difference?
I would like to take it one step back, Jorgo. The thing that we have been, what we've all been saying is, we need to be able to develop a common data sheet throughout the world. And I like to compare it against the data sheet of a car. When you want to give customer trust, you need to say what are the data fields, number of vehicles, consumption, CO2 exhaust, etc. Then you need to agree what are the units. Comparing miles to the gallon against liters to 100 kilometers, it's not that easy. There are conversion tables. But then you need to agree on how am I going to measure that consumption. And that is the famous drive cycles. Certain drive cycles in the US exist, other ones exist in Europe, other ones exist in Asia, etc. And they need to be very well documented so that people understand how is this consumption being measured. And we already see that even though different methodologies or different test cycles exist in various continents, that there are kind of conversion tables to say, in case it's tested like this, yeah, likely it will result in that consumption when it would have been a European test cycle. And I think that's fantastic. That's being done. And this is only to represent to people the data sheet, the factual elements. What does this car look like? Afterwards, there can be a political choice, which I call a label, cutoff criteria, eligibility criteria. You can have many words for that to say what people deem to have a good car or a bad car. 3 liters per 100 kilometer might be a good car or a green car in certain policies. It might not be good enough in other policies. And so I think it's important that we distinguish the harmonization and the certification standard, which is developing the data sheet. There we need to strive for harmonization as quickly as possible. And then we can discuss later on the labels. When we look at the same piece of paper, some jurisdictions might say this is good, others might say it's bad. Typically in Europe, you can expect that something that is coming from nuclear, that even when it has the same carbon footprint in the whenever it's produced in Germany or in France, likely there is a political appetite in France saying this is low carbon and this is good, whereas in Germany they might not agree to that, even though from a carbon footprint perspective we're talking about the same thing. When you ask about the certified labels, I think you need to. I think we need to be. We need to be fair with ourselves. They've been developed in an historical context in 2015, when the biggest electrolyzer was 200 kilowatt. Nobody imagined that at scale we would be producing hydrogen and putting it into even into our gas pipelines. So that's why we've been choosing at the time the benchmark of a steam methane reformer. We thought that hydrogen would be going into industry. We could even question the benchmark that we used back then today. Maybe the right benchmark is what is the carbon intensity of burning natural gas to create domestic or industrial heat. Also, back in the days, we said minus 60 is something that we should aim for, because if you go below minus 60, you are going to kill a lot of biomass-based pathways. And again, I repeat, in 2015, the biggest electrolyzer was 200 kilowatts. We thought that we needed bio-based hydrogen into the energy transition. Nowadays, we see that 100 megawatt electrolyzers, even gigawatts, are being discussed, are still technological challenging, but they're definitely feasible. So maybe indeed we need to revise those. We need to revise those labels. But let us keep into mind, presenting a data sheet and determining cutoff criteria or a label are two very different things, and we should not confuse them.
Thank you, Wouter. I would like, because we are unfortunately limited in time, give David and finally Daria the chance to give us an idea of the timeline they expect and the feasibility under the pressure that we are of this to become real very soon. David, I start with you and your concrete proposal that you made to the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance.
Yes, I mean, basically, we in Fertiberia, we have a very clear ambition and expectation, and we want to. I mean, we are starting next year we are developing in the following years to replace gradually our gray hydrogen production and ammonia production with renewable and low carbon production. We are working in other projects in other geographies, as I was explaining before. And we believe that, our ambition is to get to net zero. And this is also the ambition of the fertilizer industry. And we want to make it soon. It's not about 2040, it's before. Okay, so every single element that is important in the puzzle needs to be present. And ammonia certification and hydrogen certification is a fundamental aspect of it that enables the development of this kind of market and business model. So this is our approach.
Many thanks, Daria. Your idea, your feeling about the timeline on a European, but rather on a global level.
Yeah, to be concise, the time is now, because indeed the projects that are due to go live fairly soon, we're talking about, end of this year, beginning of next year, for which indeed the credible and transparent way of qualifying hydrogen as renewable low carbon will play a key role. So I would just reiterate that the development of those enhanced guarantees of origin that would evidence not only the origin, but also the carbon footprint and other sustainability attributes of hydrogen is absolutely key to enable consumer trust, stimulate demand, and allow for market-based sourcing of hydrogen and cross-border trade at global level.
That was a very good comment to end this discussion. We could continue for hours, but I think your active contribution and setting this issue up very high on behalf of the European Commission, this side event shows that we are basically at a historical crossroad here. Hydrogen can help, but we need the tools that we discussed today, the guarantees of origin, the certification schemes to make it happen. And we highlighted different pathways, and many of valuable information have been said here. Thanks to you, Daria. Thanks, Wouter. Thanks, David. And thanks to you, to the audience, to have listened to us. We are happy to answer also questions offline, of course, if you wish. Hydrogen is here to help. It's unstoppable. And we make this hero net zero make a part of this energy transition on a global scale. Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye. That's all for today. Bye-bye.